What if the person you trusted most in the world betrayed you? Nate thought he had it all, until he uncovered a devastating secret. His wife, Sarah, had been hiding a secret affair with a man who wasn't just a lover, but a con artist using her for his own gain. As the truth unfolds, Nate faces a heartbreaking decision. Can he ever forgive her? Or is this the end of everything they once had? Watch as the shocking truth comes to light, and the battle for love, trust, and redemption begins. Don't miss the twists, the pain, and the ultimate reckoning. I had never imagined that the day would come when I would discover something that would shatter my life. It was a Tuesday, a typical day like any other. I was at my desk in the home office, scrolling through emails, when one email caught my attention. It wasn't the subject line, but the name in the from field, Sarah O'Connor, and it wasn't a message I had ever expected to see. My heart skipped a beat as I clicked it open. What I read next made my stomach churn. There were no words of love or affection, but rather a string of messages that sent a sharp, piercing pain through my chest. I could feel my pulse quicken as I scrolled further. It wasn't just a casual exchange. No, this was something much deeper. The language was intimate, secretive, and filled with promises of shared moments only meant for the eyes of one person. But that person wasn't me. The words in front of me were from Tom, her affair partner. The messages were explicit, filled with anticipation for their next meeting. They had planned it out carefully, on our anniversary no less. We will finally be together, no more pretending, it's all about us now. I sat there frozen, the weight of the revelation sinking in. How long had this been going on? Was I the fool, completely unaware of the subtle shifts, the coldness in her touch, the moments she had pulled away? I didn't want to believe it, but the proof was right in front of me. There was no denying it now. The woman I had spent years with, the woman I trusted, loved, and built a life with, had betrayed me. And the man she was with, Tom, wasn't just a fleeting mistake. He was someone she'd been hiding in plain sight, right under my nose. My hands trembled as I sat back in my chair. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, heavy. It felt like my chest was collapsing, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. How could she do this? After everything we'd built? After the kids, the house, the memories? How could she destroy it all? I thought back to the last few months. The small arguments, the growing distance between us. The moments when I would reach out only to be met with indifference. I never suspected this. But now, looking back, the signs were all there and I had ignored them, too blind, too in love to see the truth. I read through the messages again, more slowly this time. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my gut. The thought of her in the arms of another man was unbearable. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had ever felt. My mind raced with thoughts of how I would confront her. How could I even look her in the eyes after this? I quickly closed the email and stared at the screen. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront her right away, to storm in and demand answers, but another part of me wanted to hold on to the life I thought we had, to deny the truth for just a little longer. I got up and walked to the kitchen, needing air, needing space. I thought of our kids, of how this would affect them, and my heart sank even further. I couldn't let them see me like this. I had to be strong. But how could I be strong when everything I believed in was now a lie? I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. I need to think this through. I couldn't rush into anything. I had to figure out what to do, what was best for me, for us. But one thing was clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days after the discovery felt like I was walking through a fog. I couldn't focus. My thoughts were scattered like a puzzle I couldn't put together. Each time I tried to think clearly, her face appeared, taunting me. How could she betray me? How long had this been going on? And most of all, why didn't I see it sooner? I didn't confront her yet. Part of me wanted to, needed to, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had to be sure. I had to know the full extent of her lies before I let her know that I knew. So I decided to investigate. Quietly, secretly. I started by keeping my distance. I became observant, watching her every move without her knowing. At first, I pretended everything was normal. I went through the motions, work, meals, conversation, but my mind was always elsewhere. Every time I looked at her, I was calculating, measuring. Was she hiding something again? Was she meeting him? It was painful. Every time she was distant or seemed too busy with something, my mind raced. Was she meeting him? Was she lying to me again? I'd pick up her phone, pretending to text someone or look at a work email, but I wasn't really paying attention to what was on the screen. I was just waiting, watching. I'd check her social media, her phone logs, her emails, anything that could give me a clue. I didn't find much at first, just mundane things, harmless messages from friends, work appointments, the usual. But I knew better now. Something was off. I followed her one night after dinner just to be sure. I told her I was going to meet a colleague at a bar to discuss business, which was partially true. I needed to clear my mind and figure out what to do next, but really, I was trailing her. She didn't notice me at first, as I kept a distance, but as I saw her walking into that restaurant, I knew. My stomach dropped. There he was, Tom. He was already sitting at a table waiting for her. The sight of them together, so casual, so comfortable with each other, made my blood boil. I stood in the shadows, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to walk over there, confront them, shout, demand answers. But I stayed still, paralyzed by the situation. I had to see this through, had to know how deep this betrayal really ran. She sat down, and they talked quietly. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told me everything I needed to know. They were close. Too close. I watched her laugh, her hand resting on his, and I felt a rush of anger and betrayal wash over me. How could she be this open, this casual with him? How could she lie to my face every day? I took a step back, my mind racing. How long had they been seeing each other? Was this an affair in the making, or was it something that had been going on for much longer than I imagined? The rest of the night blurred together as I walked away, my thoughts consumed by the sight of her and Tom side by side, like nothing mattered. I couldn't bear to see more, to witness this part of our life. But I knew I had to. I had to know everything. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't say a word. I didn't even mention it the next morning when she asked how my meeting went. It was all I could do to keep a calm face, to pretend like I hadn't just watched my wife share a moment with another man. I felt hollow, betrayed, but the anger hadn't hit yet. That would come later, when I had all the pieces, when I could no longer ignore the truth. For now, all I could do was gather more evidence, piece by piece, until I could finally confront her with the full weight of her lies. The day I confirmed my worst fear felt like the world had stopped spinning. I had the evidence in my hands, but it still felt surreal. It wasn't just the texts, the emails, the quiet whispers in the dark. It was the undeniable reality that Sarah, my wife, had been seeing another man. And not just any man, but someone I knew, a man who had been hiding in plain sight for months. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking in front of me. The messages were still there, vivid and painful, just like the first time I saw them. I read them again, and this time the words hit harder. There was no denying it now. Meeting tonight, right? Can't wait to see you. We'll pick up where we left off last time. That was from Tom. He was eager, excited, like they were planning something special, something only they shared. But in that moment I realized that what they shared wasn't love. It was a secret. A lie. I felt nauseous. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the rest of the conversation. It wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown affair. There were plans for weekends away, late-night rendezvous, promises of a future without me. I didn't want to read anymore, but I couldn't stop. Each message was like a dagger to my chest. Each one reminded me of how far she had gone, how deep she had buried this lie. I slammed the laptop shut, but the pain didn't stop. It only intensified. I stood up, pacing around the room, trying to get my bearings. How long had this been going on? A week? A month? How many times had I looked at her, thought I knew her, but was completely oblivious to the truth? How many nights had she laid next to me, pretending to be the woman I married, when all along she was giving her heart to someone else? The weight of it all was suffocating. I felt like I was drowning in betrayal, in disbelief, in the overwhelming sadness of it all. And yet, there was a part of me, a dark part, that wanted to confront her, to scream at her, to throw it all in her face. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not until I had more answers. I needed to hear it from her. I needed her to say it. I needed her to admit it. I couldn't let her get away with this, not after everything. I couldn't let her pretend that she didn't know what she was doing. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a betrayal that went deep, a betrayal that I would never be able to forget. I picked up my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed her number. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath shallow. She answered on the second ring, her voice light, as if nothing had changed. "Hey, Nate," she said, the familiarity of her voice almost cutting me open. "How's your day going?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to lash out, but I didn't. Instead, I said the only thing I could manage. "We need to talk. About us. About everything." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a brief silence that felt like an eternity. Then she said, "Okay. When?" "Tonight," I replied. "When you get home." And with that, I hung up. I didn't give her a chance to say anything else. There was nothing left to say. The truth was already out there. She knew it. I knew it. And now, it was time to face the consequences. That evening, Sarah came home late. I had prepared myself for this moment, but nothing could prepare me for the coldness that settled between us when she walked through that door. She knew. I could see it in her eyes. The guilt, the shame. She had been waiting for this moment, for the moment when I would finally confront her. She stood in the doorway, looking at me, and I could feel the walls she had built up between us. She was trying to avoid the conversation, trying to hide the truth, but I wasn't going to let her. Not this time. "Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You owe me the truth." She took a deep breath, her eyes dropping to the floor. I could see the hesitation in her face, the struggle. She knew she had lost me, but still she wasn't ready to face the reality. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she said quietly, almost as if she was trying to excuse herself. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I couldn't hold it in anymore. "How long, Sarah? How long has this been going on? All this time you were with him, lying to me, and you think you can just brush it off with some weak excuse?" She looked at me then, her eyes filled with tears, and for a brief moment I saw the woman I once loved. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the damage. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know how it happened. I lost myself." But I couldn't listen anymore. The damage was done. The affair was confirmed. There was no turning back. I could hear her footsteps approaching, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. Every inch of me felt like I was suffocating. The weight of the truth hung heavily in the air, and I knew this moment would change everything. Sarah stood before me, but for the first time in years it felt like she was a stranger. Her eyes met mine, but there was no remorse, no apology. Just a cold, defensive wall that had always been there beneath the surface. "I never thought you'd find out like this," Sarah said, her voice soft, but there was an edge to it. It was almost like she was trying to justify what she had done, as if it was somehow my fault that she had made this choice. I could hear it in the way she said it. The blame was there, but not for herself. "Don't do this, Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside. "You betrayed me, and you're still trying to make excuses for it?" She flinched, but instead of showing the vulnerability I expected, she lifted her chin and stepped closer. "I didn't want this to happen, but you weren't there for me, Nate. You were always busy with your work, your business meetings. You couldn't even see me, let alone love me the way I needed." I stared at her, disbelief overtaking the hurt. "You're blaming me? After everything we've built together, everything we've shared? You chose him over me. And now you're going to sit here and act like it was all my fault." Sarah's expression hardened. "I didn't choose him over you, Nate. It's not that simple. I was lost. And he made me feel seen. He cared about me in ways you stopped doing a long time ago." The words hit me like a slap in the face. He made her feel seen? What the hell did that even mean? How could she reduce everything we had into that one simple excuse? A feeling of anger bubbled up inside me, but I forced it down. "You still don't get it, do you? You think it was just about feeling seen? That's how you justify betraying me, ruining everything?" My voice rose despite myself. "This wasn't just a mistake, this was a choice. A conscious decision to lie to me, to break everything we had. Her gaze faltered for a split second, but it quickly hardened again. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Nate. You think you can just make me feel guilty and expect me to apologize for what I needed? She crossed her arms. I'm not sorry, not in the way you want me to be. Her defiance hit me like a punch. I thought she would break down, show some sign of regret, but there was none. She was standing her ground not as a wife, but as someone who felt justified in her actions, and that stung more than anything else. I stood there, unable to speak for a moment, the hurt and anger swirling inside me. She had destroyed me, and now she was defending it. I could feel my grip on the situation slipping. Is this really how you want to end this, Sarah? I asked, my voice tight. Is this how you want to end us? Her eyes softened for a brief moment, but her voice remained firm. I'm not asking you to understand. I'm just asking you to accept the reality. This is who I am now, and you'll have to decide whether you can live with that or not. Her words echoed in my head, like a constant reminder that everything I knew about her had been an illusion. I didn't know who she was anymore, and I didn't know if I could ever get that back. I turned away, needing space, needing time to think. She stayed silent, watching me, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. The silence between us now felt like a vast, cold chasm. The person I thought I knew, the woman I had loved, was gone. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, someone who had made choices that had ripped apart everything I believed in. I had to face it. We were no longer a we. I was alone in this, and the hardest part was realizing that she had already made her peace with it. I didn't expect this. After everything that had already happened, I never thought I'd still be in the dark. But somehow, there was more to uncover. There was more to this betrayal than I could have ever imagined. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The texts from Sarah and Tom were damning enough, but as I dug deeper, I realized something that made my blood run cold. Tom wasn't just some guy she'd met. He had been using her, and worse, she had been so blinded by her feelings for him that she never saw it coming. I had spent the entire afternoon going over every piece of evidence I could find. His messages, their emails, all of it. There was one thing that stuck out to me. The way he spoke about money. Not in a casual way, but like it was something they both knew all too well. He wasn't just interested in Sarah's affection, he was interested in something else entirely. I dug into his background. It didn't take long. I had a few contacts in the right places, and within hours I found out the truth. Tom wasn't just a freelance writer. He was deeply involved in shady financial dealings, had a history of scams, and was well known in certain circles for taking advantage of vulnerable women. Sarah wasn't the first one, and she certainly wouldn't be the last. My hand shook as I sat back in the chair. All of these months I had thought he was the charming, thoughtful guy who had swept her off her feet. But now I saw the reality. Tom was a manipulator, and Sarah had been his victim, just like so many others before her. I thought about Sarah and her desperation. She'd fallen for the wrong person, someone who had played on her insecurities and promises of a life filled with excitement and passion. She had been looking for something she didn't have at home, and Tom gave it to her, but for the wrong reasons. It made me sick to think about it. She had betrayed me, yes, but now I realized that Tom had betrayed her too. He had used her for his own benefit, and she hadn't even seen it coming. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Sarah had made her choices, but Tom, he was the one who had orchestrated this entire mess. He wasn't just the other man, he was the one who had broken her. He had taken advantage of her vulnerability, knowing full well that she was looking for something more than what I could offer. He gave her attention, affection, things I couldn't always provide, not because I didn't want to, but because of the weight of everyday life, the pressures that came with being a husband and a father. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the private investigator I had hired earlier. I needed more details. I needed to know everything about Tom. I needed to know how far he had gone with this. When the investigator called me back, I listened closely, my heart pounding. He had more on Tom, much more. Financial records showed that Tom was in serious debt, deeper than I could have imagined. He had been using Sarah's naivety to mask his own problems, feeding her lies about his business ventures, about his success, when all the while he was spiraling into more trouble. My mind raced. This wasn't just about love anymore. This was about power, about control. Tom had manipulated both of us, using our weaknesses against us. But now I had the truth. I had everything I needed to confront both of them, Sarah and Tom. The time for games was over. Sarah needed to know what she had fallen into, and Tom needed to see that I wasn't going to let him destroy my family without consequences. I felt a surge of determination. I wasn't going to be the passive victim anymore. I was going to take control of this situation, and I would make sure they both knew the depth of their betrayal. I stood up, pacing around the room. I thought about Sarah, sitting in the house that we had built together, still oblivious to the truth about Tom. She had no idea how deep the lies ran. But soon she would. I wasn't sure how this would all end, but I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't going to be with me sitting idly by. The walls of our home, once a sanctuary, felt like they were closing in. Every day was harder than the last, and I could feel the weight of the lies pressing down on me, suffocating me. Sarah had started to unravel in a way I couldn't have predicted. She was no longer the woman I knew. She was a stranger, someone I couldn't recognize, and yet she was still here, still pretending that everything was fine. I tried to be calm. I tried to keep the peace, to make sense of the chaos inside me. But every time I looked at her, I saw nothing but the ghost of the woman I had loved. It felt like I was living in some twisted version of reality, where nothing was what it seemed, and everything I had believed in was falling apart. The more Sarah tried to hold it together, the more she seemed to fall apart. She spent hours on the phone, pacing back and forth, her eyes darting nervously whenever I walked into the room. It was as if she was waiting for the world to come crashing down, and maybe deep down she knew it was. I watched her, my mind racing with a million thoughts. What was she thinking? Was she even sorry? Was she feeling the same way I did, like everything was broken beyond repair? I didn't know. I couldn't tell. But what I did know was that the woman I thought I knew was slipping away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a shell. It wasn't just the affair anymore. It was everything. The way she looked at me now, the way she avoided my eyes, the way she tried to act like everything was fine. I could see the cracks in her facade, the guilt, the shame. She was losing control, and it was only a matter of time before everything she had built up with Tom came crashing down. I couldn't escape the feeling that she was living a double life. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Tom had done more than just steal her heart. He had manipulated her. He had made her believe that their affair was something real, something worth fighting for. But what had it all been for? Nothing. It was just another lie in a long string of lies. And now, as Sarah's world unraveled, I was left holding the pieces. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that I knew the truth about Tom, about the way he had used her, about the man he truly was. She thought she could escape the consequences, but she couldn't. Not anymore. One evening after dinner, she broke down. The weight of it all finally caught up with her. She sat on the couch, her hands trembling as she tried to speak. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I never meant for this to happen," she said, her words shaky. "I never meant to hurt you, but I was lost. I felt so alone. And Tom, he made me feel alive again. I don't know how it happened. It was a mistake, Nate. It was all just a mistake." I stood there, silent, unable to respond. Her apology didn't feel real. It didn't change what had already been done. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that I was done. I was done with the lies, done with the deceit. I had been holding on for too long, pretending that everything was fine. But now I couldn't pretend anymore. I had to let go. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about me, about my own sense of worth. I couldn't keep putting myself through this. I couldn't keep waiting for a woman who was already gone. "I don't know who you are anymore," I finally said, my voice low, steady but filled with so much emotion it hurt. "And I don't think you do either." Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, Nate," she whispered, reaching out to me. "Please don't give up on me." But it was too late. I had already given up on us, on her. And as she sat there, broken and pleading, I realized that the only person I could save now was myself. The days that followed felt like I was trapped in a fog, unable to move, but always aware of the distance between Sarah and me. Despite the cold silence, she tried. God, she tried. But I could see it. Her desperation to make things right, to fix what she had shattered with one moment of weakness. One evening, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. "Nate," she started, her voice trembling, "I know I've broken everything, but please don't give up on us. I love you." The words hit me like a slap in the face. She loved me? Was this love? How could she say that when she had torn apart everything we'd built? I could see the sincerity in her eyes, the regret, but it felt hollow, like a last-ditch attempt to salvage something when the damage was irreversible. I took a breath, steadying myself before I spoke. "Sarah," I said, my voice low, "you don't get to just say that. You don't get to pretend that love is enough after everything you've done, after everything I've learned." Her face fell, and I saw the panic in her eyes. I know. I was wrong, but this isn't me, Nate. I was lost. You weren't there and I was drowning. I didn't know where else to go, and Tom, he made me feel alive again. But I see it now. It was all a lie." Her words hit harder than I expected, and I felt a pang of sadness for her, even though I knew I shouldn't. She had fallen for someone who fed on her insecurities, someone who used her, just like she had used me. I had to remind myself of that, to remember that the woman I thought I knew wasn't the one sitting in front of me now. "I can't just forget this, Sarah. I can't just forgive you because you're sorry now." The anger I had tried to suppress surfaced. "You've been lying to me for months, and now you want me to just accept it because you're crying? Because you say you love me?" She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't even deserve you. But Nate, please, give me a chance to prove I'm still the woman you loved." The weight of her words pressed down on me. I thought back to the days when we laughed together, when life felt simple, when love felt real. I wanted to believe her. God, how badly I wanted to believe that we could still find our way back. But the reality was different now. I felt numb, like a part of me had already given up. "You've shattered me, Sarah, and what you're asking for now, it's too much." I stood up, walking to the window, looking out into the darkened yard. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." There was a long pause, and I could hear her breath hitching in the silence. I didn't turn around to face her, but I could feel her presence behind me, small, fragile, broken. "I will do anything, Nate," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I will fight for you, for us. Please don't let this be the end." I turned to face her, my heart aching at the sight of her tears, the desperate look in her eyes. But deep down I knew I couldn't go back. I knew I couldn't be the person she needed me to be, not after everything. I had to protect myself, even if it meant losing her. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay strong. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She sank to her knees, tears falling freely now. "Please, Nate, I can't lose you, not like this." For a moment I almost caved, almost reached out to her, to hold her, to comfort her. But I stopped myself. There were no more chances. The damage was done, and I wasn't going to be the fool who let it happen again. "I think it's over," I said quietly, the words feeling like a weight lifting off my chest. "There's nothing left here." I could see the devastation in her face, but I couldn't make myself go back. I had to let go, for both of us. The silence between Sarah and me had settled into a suffocating fog, thick with unspoken words. The attempts at reconciliation were now just memories, faded and hollow. But the moment that truly shattered her, that broke her into pieces she couldn't put back together, came not from the affair, but from something much more unexpected. It was a Wednesday when the email came through. I had just sat down to finish some work when Sarah walked into the room, her face pale, the light in her eyes dimmed with something I couldn't quite place. She had that look again, the one that said everything was falling apart. "Nate," she began, her voice shaky, "I need to tell you something." I looked up from my screen, unsure of what to expect. The last few weeks had been nothing but confusion and pain, and yet I still couldn't prepare myself for what came next. "The business, Tom's business," she said, swallowing hard. It's a mess. He's in debt, Nate. A lot of debt. I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know he was this far gone." I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach. Everything that had been happening felt like it was spiraling out of control. She had no idea that I already knew about Tom's shady financial dealings. The truth was, Tom's mess was bigger than just his lies to Sarah. His financial ruin had now become hers. "What do you mean, Sarah? What are you saying?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though I could feel the tension building in my chest. She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. "He used me, Nate. He used my name. He got us involved in this business venture, and now it's all falling apart. I don't even know what to do. We could lose everything." For a moment, I couldn't say anything. The weight of the betrayal hit me again, this time not from the affair, but from the financial disaster she had unknowingly allowed herself to be dragged into. Tom had used her naivety, her trust, to get what he wanted, and now she was left to clean up the mess. "I've been paying off some of the debts with money I didn't even know we had," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "I tried to fix it. I tried to keep it under control, but now it's too late. The creditors are coming, Nate. We're going to lose everything." I stood up, feeling the ground beneath me tilt. The anger I had been suppressing, the grief, the sense of betrayal, everything collided in that moment. She was in debt, not just financially but emotionally. She had been so wrapped up in Tom's lies that she had failed to see the reality of what was happening. It wasn't just her marriage that was falling apart, it was everything. "Sarah," I said, my voice cold, "you've got to be kidding me. We've worked our whole lives to build something stable, and you let him drag you into this mess? Into his lies?" She flinched at the sharpness in my tone, but I couldn't help it. The betrayal stung deeper than I had expected. How could she have trusted someone like Tom so blindly? How could she have been so naive? "I didn't know," she pleaded, taking a step toward me, her hands shaking. "I thought I was helping him. I thought we could build something together, something real. But I didn't know it was all falling apart. I didn't know he was using me like that." Her words were desperate, but they didn't make the situation any better. The damage had already been done. The debts were mounting, and now I had to figure out how to salvage whatever was left of our life. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the room. "This isn't just about money, Sarah. It's about trust. It's about everything you let him destroy. You let him take everything, and now you're telling me it's too late to fix it?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for any of this. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to destroy everything we had." I looked at her then, really looked at her. There was no more pretending, no more excuses. We had nothing left but the broken pieces of a life that had once felt whole. And in that moment I realized just how far gone we were. She had lost herself in him, in the lies, and now she was paying the price. The silence between us was unbearable. The weight of the financial ruin of her betrayal hung in the air, suffocating us both. "I don't know what to say anymore," I said, my voice tight. "I don't know if we can fix this, Sarah. I don't know if we can survive this." And with those words I knew it. The unraveling was complete. Everything we had built, everything we had worked for, was slipping away piece by piece. The phone call came just hours after Sarah's confession about the financial mess Tom had dragged us into. I had barely processed the chaos of that revelation when my phone buzzed on the counter. The name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. Carla Montgomery, Sarah's lawyer. I answered, bracing myself for what was coming next, my mind still tangled in a web of disbelief and anger. "Nate, it's Carla," she said, her tone professional, but I could hear the weight behind her words. "I think it's time we talk. You should know everything." I felt a chill run through me as I heard those words. My stomach tightened. Everything? Hadn't I already learned the worst of it? But something in her voice told me I wasn't prepared for the truth that was about to come. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice hoarse, a mix of fear and frustration flooding through me. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if Carla was weighing whether she should say what she was about to say. When she spoke again, her words hit me like a sledgehammer. "You need to know something about Tom," she began, her voice softening slightly. "He's not who Sarah thinks he is. There's more to him. A lot more." I closed my eyes, feeling the pieces of my world shatter even further. "What do you mean?" I repeated, this time more urgently, my grip on the phone tightening. "Tom's not just a struggling freelance writer," Carla continued, each word a blow. "He's been involved in more than just bad investments. He's in trouble, serious trouble. He has debts, Nate, big ones, and some of it's tied to illegal activity. Your wife, Sarah, she's been wrapped up in it all unknowingly." My heart raced. I felt the blood drain from my face as the weight of the truth crashed over me. It wasn't just financial deceit. It wasn't just the affair. Sarah hadn't just been betrayed by Tom. She had been used. All along, she had been the pawn in his game. And now I realized how much of her life, her choices, had been based on lies. "Illegal activity?" I asked, my voice barely audible. My mind was spinning. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that Tom's past is darker than anyone knows. He's involved in scams, money laundering, and who knows what else. He dragged Sarah into this mess with false promises, and now they're both on the hook for something that's much worse than a simple affair." The world around me seemed to fade as Carla's words settled into the air. Every moment I had shared with Sarah, every fight we'd had, every doubt that had crossed my mind about her choices, it all hit me like a ton of bricks. She had trusted Tom. She had believed him, and now she was paying the price. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and I thought about the past months, how every gesture from Sarah, every excuse, every late night made sense now. She wasn't just emotionally distant. She was caught up in something far more dangerous, far more complicated than I could have ever imagined. "Why didn't she know?" I finally asked, my voice cracking. "How could she not know?" "She didn't, Nate," Carla replied gently. "Tom's a master manipulator. He plays people like pawns, and Sarah, unfortunately, was one of his biggest targets. She believed he was her way out of a mundane life. She believed in him." I felt a wave of anger surge through me, but it was mixed with pity. I didn't know what to feel anymore. How could Sarah have been so blind? How could she have trusted him so completely, only to find herself entangled in his mess? "You need to confront her, Nate," Carla said, bringing me back to reality. "The truth has to come out. She needs to face what she's really involved in, and you need to decide whether you're willing to stand by her through it." Her words rang in my ears, but I didn't know what to say. Stand by her? How could I, knowing everything I knew now? How could I be the one to help her when she had broken every part of me? "I'll think about it," I said, my voice distant. I didn't know if I was talking to Carla or to myself. I hung up the phone, the weight of her words crushing me. Sarah wasn't just the victim of an affair. She wasn't just a woman who made a mistake. She was deep into something far darker, something that would change everything. I stood there for a moment, staring out the window, my mind racing with the realization of how much of her world I still didn't understand. And now, it was all too much. The truth was out there, and I was standing on the edge of something I wasn't sure I could face. But I couldn't turn away, not now. The house was quiet, too quiet, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something. Sarah sat across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes swollen from the tears she had shed all day. Her hands trembled slightly as she twisted the edge of a napkin between her fingers. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if there were any words left to say. The weight of everything we had gone through, everything that had been laid bare between us, hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Her voice was soft, almost fragile as she spoke, but I could hear the sincerity in her words. "I know I've hurt you, Nate," she began, her voice breaking. "I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want you to know. I am truly sorry. I never meant to destroy us. I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to listen. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the woman sitting across from me with tears in her eyes could be the same person I had once trusted, once loved, but I couldn't. It was too late for that. The damage was done. "Sorry doesn't change anything, Sarah," I replied, my voice cold and steady. "Sorry doesn't take back the months of lies. Sorry doesn't undo the betrayal. It doesn't undo what you did to us." She flinched at the harshness in my words, but I didn't soften. I couldn't. Every part of me wanted to scream, to shout at her, to make her feel the same pain that had been eating at me since I discovered her affair. But instead, I just stared at her, feeling hollow inside. "I was lost, Nate," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought I could find something in Tom, something I wasn't getting from you. I was selfish, and I made a mistake." A mistake? That was how she saw it? A mistake? I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to break through. "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice thick with emotion. "No, Sarah, this wasn't just a mistake. This was a choice you made over and over again. You chose him. You chose to lie to me. You chose to tear everything apart. And now you're asking for forgiveness?" She looked at me, desperation in her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I know I've destroyed your trust and I can never take that back. But I need you to know, I am truly sorry. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." The words hung in the air, and I could see the sincerity in her face. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, the betrayal, the feeling of being worthless. It wasn't enough to heal the cracks that had formed in me, cracks that would never fully heal. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Sarah's face crumpled as the tears started to fall. "Please, Nate," she begged, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I love you. I've always loved you. I was lost." I couldn't look at her anymore. The guilt, the shame in her eyes. If only it had come sooner. If only she had seen the consequences before it all came crashing down. "You say you love me," I said softly, "but love isn't enough to fix this. Love isn't enough to take away what you've done." The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know what I was supposed to do now. She had broken me, and no apology, no matter how sincere, could take that pain away. I had tried to love her, tried to understand her, but now I didn't know if I could ever be the same again. "I don't think there's anything left for us, Sarah," I said, finally breaking the silence. "I think we've reached the end. You've made your choices, and I've made mine." She reached out for me, but I pulled away, feeling a tight knot form in my chest. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I could even forgive myself for staying as long as I had. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her voice filled with regret, but I didn't respond. The house fell silent again. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't listen to the words that didn't mean anything anymore. There was no going back. The apology, no matter how sincere, had fallen short. I never expected this. I had spent weeks piecing together the puzzle of Sarah's betrayal, slowly unraveling the threads of her lies, but nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The truth about Tom was a bombshell, one that exploded everything I thought I knew about Sarah, about us, and about him. It all started when Carla, Sarah's lawyer, called me. She had hinted at something bigger, but I hadn't wanted to listen. I had been too consumed by the affair itself, by the hurt, to consider that Tom was more than just a man who had broken my heart. But the reality was darker than I could have imagined. "Nate, you need to hear this," Carla had said. Her voice was grim. "There's more to Tom. A lot more. And it's not just about what happened with Sarah. He's been involved in things far worse than anyone thought." The weight of her words pressed on me. I had already seen the cracks in Tom's facade, his money problems, his manipulative behavior. But hearing this from Carla, hearing the confirmation that he was not just a casual lover, but a dangerous, deceitful man, made my blood run cold. "Tell me what you know," I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. Carla sighed on the other end of the line. "I've been digging into his past," she began, her words measured. "Tom isn't just some random writer. He's been running a scam, pulling women like Sarah into it, promising them everything while he takes them for everything they're worth. There's more money laundering, more fraud than you can imagine. He's been living off the lies of others, using their trust and their love to get what he wants." The reality was sinking in. Sarah hadn't just been the victim of a passionate affair gone wrong. She had been manipulated, exploited by Tom in ways that went beyond the affair itself. I had thought she was the only one who had been hurt, but now I realized that Tom had been playing both of us, me and the woman I had once loved, for a fool. "He's deep in debt," Carla continued, "and he's been using Sarah to hide it, her credit, her name. He used them to mask his own financial ruin. But now it's all coming to light. He's been deceiving everyone. He's a con artist, Nate." I felt sick. Every piece of evidence I had found, every suspicion had now been confirmed. The man Sarah had fallen for was nothing but a predator, using her trust to escape the consequences of his own choices. And she hadn't even known. She had been so blind, so desperate for affection, that she had let him pull her into his mess. I couldn't even imagine how she would react when she found out the truth, when she realized that Tom had manipulated her every step of the way. The betrayal now felt even worse. It wasn't just the affair, it was everything that had led up to it. Tom had systematically broken down Sarah's defenses, feeding her lies that made her believe she could build a life with him. He had made her believe she was the one who had lost control, that it was her fault for feeling neglected, for feeling abandoned. He was the architect of her fall, and I was just the bystander, left to pick up the pieces. When I confronted Sarah that night, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how she would react, how much more of her world would come crashing down around her. But when I told her everything I had learned, when I told her about Tom's true nature, about his criminal activities and how he had used her, her face went pale. She sat down, staring at me as if I had struck her. Her eyes were wide with disbelief, the shock of the revelation settling over her like a dark cloud. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never knew, Nate. I didn't know he was like this." I didn't feel sorry for her, not anymore. It was hard to muster any compassion for her when everything she had done, every choice she had made, had led to this moment. But I couldn't help but feel a sense of pity. She had been taken in by a man who was nothing but a liar, a thief, and now she was left with nothing but the wreckage of her decisions. "I loved him, Nate," she said, her voice shaky. "I thought I could build a life with him. I thought he was different." But the truth was that Tom had never been different. He was always the same. He was a man who used people, manipulated them, and then discarded them when they no longer served his purpose. And now Sarah was just another casualty of his game. "You need to understand, Sarah," I said, my voice steady but cold. "This isn't just about what you did to me. This is about you. You let yourself be used, and now we're both paying for it. You're not the only one who's been hurt." She didn't respond. There was nothing she could say. The truth had come out, and all the apologies in the world couldn't undo the damage. The air between Sarah and me had become so thick with tension that it was suffocating. The truth was out there, and it wasn't just the affair anymore. It was everything that had led up to this moment. The lies, the deceit, the shattered trust. There was nothing left but the wreckage of a relationship that once felt unbreakable. Sarah had begged for my forgiveness over and over again, but each apology felt more hollow than the last. She was sorry, yes. She regretted everything, yes. But none of that changed what had happened, what had been lost. Could I ever really forgive her? Could I ever go back to the man I was before all of this? I watched her from across the room, her eyes filled with remorse, her face pale from the weight of everything she had done. I couldn't make myself reach out to her. There was nothing left to say, no more empty words to throw back and forth. The truth had cut deeper than any apology could heal. But still, she stood there, pleading for a second chance. She didn't want this to be the end, and a part of me wondered if she even understood the magnitude of what she was asking. Was it too much to ask for me to give her one last shot, to believe her again, to fight for what we once had? "You're asking for too much," I finally said, my voice quiet but firm. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had faded into exhaustion, into a quiet resignation. You're asking me to forget everything, to pretend it didn't happen. But it did, Sarah. You chose him. And now I'm supposed to just… What? Take you back because you say you love me? She shook her head, her voice trembling with emotion. I know I can't change the past. I can't take it back. But please, Nate, I need you to know I was lost. I didn't know how much I was hurting you. I never meant to destroy everything. I just needed something. Needed something? I repeated, my chest tightening. You needed something? And you found it in him? That's what you're telling me? You let him drag you into a world of lies and now you want me to be the one to fix it? Her eyes welled with tears and she took a step closer. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm asking you to give me a chance to fix it. To fix us. I love you, Nate. I always have. And I will do whatever it takes to show you that. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the woman I had once loved. But the damage ran deep. The betrayal was like a scar that would never fade. I thought about the days before all of this happened, when life had seemed simpler, when I believed in us. And now, everything felt tainted. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered, my throat tight. I don't know if I can trust you again. You've taken so much from me. How can I believe anything you say? Her face crumpled at my words, and I saw the depth of her pain. She wasn't just pleading for my forgiveness. She was pleading for redemption, for a second chance at the life we once had. But I wasn't sure I could offer that to her, not after everything. I've hurt you, and I can't take that away, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But I love you, Nate. I need you. I can't imagine my life without you. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The silence that hung between us felt unbearable. My heart ached, torn between the part of me that still wanted to believe in her and the part of me that knew I couldn't ignore what had happened. Maybe there's a part of me that still wants to believe you, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. But I can't keep living in the shadow of your lies. I can't keep pretending that everything's okay. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't reach out to comfort her. There was nothing I could say that would make this better, nothing that would erase the damage. The choice had already been made. I had to move forward, and that meant facing the reality that we couldn't go back. I don't know what to do anymore, I admitted, my voice cracking. I don't know if I can forgive you. She nodded, the weight of my words settling over her. I could see the despair in her eyes, but I also saw something else, something that made me wonder if she was beginning to understand. Maybe, just maybe, this was the hardest truth of all. Some things couldn't be fixed. Some things, once broken, stayed broken. I understand, she whispered, the words barely audible. I just wish I could change it. I wish I could go back. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of the chaos inside me. I didn't have an answer. I didn't know if there was any going back from this, but one thing was clear. Our story was no longer one of love. It had become a tale of regret, of lessons learned too late. I think this is it, Sarah, I said, my voice steady now. I think we've reached the end. The days after the final conversation felt like I was walking through a fog. I had made the decision to let go, to walk away from the woman I had loved for so long, but the reality of it hit harder than I could have imagined. Every room in our house, once filled with laughter and conversation, now felt empty. The silence was deafening. Sarah had left a few days ago, taking only what she could carry in her car. It had been a quiet departure, no final words, just the soft sound of the door closing behind her. The house, which once felt like home, now felt like a shell of what it had been. It was strange, unsettling, this feeling of nothingness. I had hoped that the pain would subside with time, that the weight of everything we'd been through would eventually fade into a distant memory. But it didn't. The truth of what had happened kept pressing into my thoughts, reminding me of everything I had lost. The financial mess, the affair, the lies. It all still felt so raw. I thought about the money Tom had used, the debts he had left behind, the trust Sarah had shattered. But there was something worse, something I couldn't shake, the sense of betrayal that ran deeper than anything I had ever known. I had given Sarah every part of myself. I had trusted her, loved her, built a life with her, and she had thrown it all away. For what? A fleeting moment of affection with someone who had used her, who had used both of us for his own gain. I couldn't escape the feeling that I had been played, that I had been foolish to believe in her, in us. But there was something else in the aftermath, something I hadn't expected, a sense of emptiness, a deep, quiet loneliness that I couldn't quite place. I had spent so long fighting for our relationship, trying to make it work, that I didn't know who I was without it, without her. Days passed, and I threw myself into work, burying my thoughts beneath deadlines and meetings, but even that didn't work. It was like I could still hear her voice in the back of my mind, still feel the weight of her presence, even though she was gone. I kept thinking about the moments we had shared, the life we had built together, and I couldn't help but wonder if it had all been a lie. The kids were with their grandparents for the weekend. I hadn't told them much. They were too young to understand what had happened, but I could see the worry in their eyes every time they saw me, every time they asked where their mom was. I didn't know what to tell them. How do you explain to children that the life they knew was no more, that their mother, the woman they loved, had betrayed everything they believed in? I sat in the living room, the stillness pressing in on me. My phone buzzed, interrupting the silence. It was Sarah. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the text message, unsure of what to do. "I'm sorry, Nate. I know I've hurt you, but I'll always love you." The words were familiar, but they felt empty now. She had said this so many times, and each time it had become less meaningful. She had used those words to patch up the damage, to try and fix what she had broken. But nothing could undo what had happened. Nothing could take away the months of lies, the years of trust eroded piece by piece. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Anger, sadness, relief. They all mingled together, a confusing mix of emotions that didn't make sense. I had let her go, but in some way I wasn't ready to fully let go of what we had. It was a battle I didn't know how to fight, a war within myself that I wasn't sure I could win. As the days went on, I started to think about what life would look like without her, without this broken relationship that had once meant everything to me. It was hard to picture a future without Sarah in it, but I knew I had to find a way. I had to heal, even if it meant letting go of the person I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. The aftermath of everything, the affair, the lies, the betrayal, was a long road to recovery. It wasn't just about the emotional scars, but the deeper, more painful realization that love, for all its power, couldn't always fix what had been broken. And so I moved forward, slowly but steadily. Not because I was ready, but because I had no other choice. I had to rebuild, not for Sarah, not for anyone else, but for me. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: I would never be the same person again.